what I sort of learned by going through this process was that, fear is not an indication that we should stop. Fear is actually a really good sign, because when we're afraid, what that means is that we're doing something that we haven't done before.
Welcome to the Go Hunt Life Show, hosted by Todd Nevins.
This is Todd Nevins, and I explore stories about people that had seemingly normal lives and careers going, but they pulled the ripcord and blew up their comfort bubbles to hunt down their life that they had always dreamed of living. On the show today, I talked to Kim Dinan. Her and her husband Brian had a great life in Portland, Oregon. Good jobs, cool house, everything was going just fine. When one day she thought, there's got to be more to life than paychecks and mortgages. That thought propelled them to quit their jobs and sell everything they owned to travel the world. And at their going away party, one of their friends handed them a gift, a yellow envelope. And in it was $1,000 and instructions to give the money away to those that they encounter on their journey. Now, 6 years later, Kim has just published a book that details the peaks and valleys of their life-changing journey. And the title of her book is The Yellow Envelope. My conversation with Kim Dinan starts right after a word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by PrintDirtCheap.com. Jeff Chrisman, the founder of Print Dirt Cheap, started his business the way most companies begin, with grit, determination, and a vision. And now, a decade later, he's built his company into an online printing powerhouse. If I've handed you a business card in the last 4 years, it was printed by Print Dirt Cheap. And the decals all over my laptop, they printed those too. They print and ship over 30 categories of printing products, from business cards and decals to banners, company letterhead, restaurant menus, and a ton of direct mail pieces. And they have just rolled out an entirely new website, ensuring that your online user experience to place an order is simple and fast. And when you place that order, use promo code LifeHunter for $10 off. And Jeff has just launched Success Hackers, which is a global group of tenacious entrepreneurs that share the latest tips, tools, and hacks into growing a business. Check it out at facebook.com/Success Hackers. Kim, thank you for jumping on the show today.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
Where are you located in the world? And if you were to walk outside, describe what you would see.
I am just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains. And so if I were to walk outside right now, I would see a beautiful blue sky and trees and lots of snow on the ground, because we just had like a surprise snowstorm yesterday.
Asheville is an incredible place, and that's an awesome part of the United States. How old are you? Are you married, and do you have kids?
Yeah, I am 36. I'm married, and I have a 2-year-old little girl.
2-year-old. All right. What is your profession and primary ways that you earn a living?
Yeah, so my profession is that I'm a writer. I also have a blog, but, primarily I earn money through freelance writing for a number of magazines and websites. And then I also put out a book last April. So that is also part of my income.
Your second book, I can't wait to get into it, and it's got a killer story behind it. But you were not always a freelance writer and published author. Back in 2012, take me back to your real job and quote, real life. Where were you living? And I know that your title was a sustainability coordinator for the city of Portland. So what did your life look like back then?
Yeah, back then I had a really great life. I mean, I was living in Portland, Oregon with my husband. We really loved that city. I had a job that people wanted my job, like I was like working in the environmental field and in like one of the most environmentally friendly cities in the country. And, it was just like a really great life. I mean, access to the mountains and friends, and we owned like this little house in a great neighborhood. So like, I think from the outside, it looked perfect. But for me, there were these things that I had always wanted to do with my life, dreams that I'd had for myself when I was just a little bit younger. I'd always wanted to travel, and I'd always really felt like I was kind of born to be a writer. I mean, as maybe cheesy as that sounds, that was the thing that I loved to do. It came naturally to me. And so I just, over time, I began to have this feeling that like I was sort of living somebody else's great life, but not my great life. And so, to make a really long story shorter, over time, I just kind of came to the realization that I had to make some changes. I wanted to travel, and now was the time to do it. And I wanted to see if I could make it as a writer. I didn't, as much as I loved and was passionate about the environment, it wasn't the thing that I felt really called to do. And so I thought, I need to try. I just got to see what will happen if I try.
You use a line on your blog, which is so many places with dashes in between so many places. But you use a line back then. What will life be like if I stay this way? That is a powerful line. What was leading up to that? Was it daydreaming in your cubicle, or were there other factors at play that were pushing you to make a pretty drastic change?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of daydreaming in my cubicle. But, there was also this feeling that like my routine was so regimented, like I woke up at the same time every day, biked to work. I worked until 4:00. I went for a run. I came home. I made dinner. I went to bed. Like that was my day. And there was no spontaneity. There was no room for, at heart, I'm a dreamer. I wanted to feel like the possibilities of my life were endless, and I didn't feel that way. The way I felt instead was that I could sit there and I could, for the most part, kind of calculate what every single day was going to be like until the day I retired. And at that time, I was only 29 years old. So there was a lot of days before I retired. And the thought was so depressing to me. I just thought, there's more to life than this. And so that thought, to be honest, it terrified me because I'm really a pretty conservative person.
You are? Really?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I mean, in the sense that big changes still scare me. They really scare me. But what I sort of learned by going through this process was that, fear is not an indication that we should stop. Fear is actually a really good sign, because when we're afraid, what that means is that we're doing something that we haven't done before. I wasn't afraid to get up and go to work every day because I did it every day, but I was afraid to think about changing my life completely because, I didn't know the result of that.
Okay, but you're also married. Your husband's name is Brian?
Brian.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what was he thinking? Did he have the same thoughts? Because you guys quit your jobs together and you've been traveling together ever since. What was going through his mind?
Well, no, he did not have the same thoughts. And I think at first he thought that I wasn't very serious because I had dabbled in a lot of things, like yoga and, I don't know, triathlons and things that I was really searching for something that would kind of fill that piece of me that felt unfulfilled, and so I think he thought, here's another one of Kim's crazy ideas. But over time, as I got more and more serious about it, I think he began to realize that I wasn't joking around and that this was something that I was going to pursue kind of over the long haul. So the idea grew on him. Of course, he was even more worried than me because in some ways he had a lot more to lose. I was unhappy with what I was doing. So there was a part of me that wanted the change.
Okay.
But he wasn't, he liked his job. He liked his life. Everything was great for him. So to give that up was a huge thing to ask someone to do, and I think even as we stepped on that plane, he wasn't sure. And truthfully, neither was I, that what we were doing was, we didn't know if it was like the smartest or the stupidest thing that we'd ever done.
All right. So walk me through. You guys both quit your jobs and stepped on that plane in around May of 2012. You reserved SoManyPlaces.com in 2010. So you had a 2-year lead up to you guys quitting. Walk me through the steps, though, of daydreaming in the cubicle to talking to Brian about, no, man, I'm serious this time. Like, I'm serious. I want to do this, to stepping on that plane. Like, what steps did you have to take to get prepared?
Oh, man. I mean, everything, because we completely dismantled our life. And actually, the reason that I started the blog in 2010, but for a year before that, I had been reading kind of other travel blogs, building up the courage to kind of confront this thing that I wanted to do. And so the blog was kind of a place for me where I could go and kind of stroke the fire of my dream, share the stories of what I was doing to get ready to take this big trip, write about my fears and all of that. And so, we started saving like every dime. We had the most boring 3 years ever leading up to that trip. We didn't go out. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. There it is. That's 3 years of savings. All right. That's a big one.
Yeah. Yep. We sold everything that we could, cars, like all of our possessions. And then we sold the house. So we were kind of like shedding everything and dwindling all of everything we owned down into what would fit in our backpacks. So that was, a long process as well. And then quitting our jobs, which was probably, the scariest thing that we ever did. Walking in and, writing those letters of, what are they even called?
Oh, that's awesome. You don't know. Letter of resignation.
Yes.
That is so great. You don't know that. Oh,
no,
man,
I don't.
That says so much. All right. So what were people? Okay. So you're following other travel blogs, people on Instagram, like all of the other people that are ahead of you. Obviously, you're trying to, follow them. I've done the same. I realized that step. Okay. So was there someone personally telling you guys are crazy, or what were the people around you telling you as you were leading up to quitting your job?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of naysayers. There were a lot of people that told us we were crazy, just general, or like kind of general one-off comments like, oh, you must have inherited a lot of money, or just kind of, oh, how great for you, but I could never do that kind of thing, without realizing sort of all of the sacrifices that went into this decision. And then, I always use this example, but my mom, I remember when I told her what we were going to do, she just begged me to take the money that we had saved and buy a bigger house.
Oh,
like that was what she wanted me to do. Yeah. And, it's like, I get it. Because from her, now that I'm a mom, especially, from her perspective, thinking about, kind of casting loose like that off into the world, I'm sure it was a scary thought for her, for her daughter to do that. But there was a lot of that, like, and I think so much of it was this just sort of the internal voice that of my society, or all the things that I'd sort of come to believe over time about what being a successful contributing member of society meant, and so the feelings inside of me like, gosh, you're so ungrateful for giving up what you have, and you're ruining your life, and you're going to end up like you're going to be working till you're 90 because you've totally screwed everything up, and all of those feelings were there. I just kind of they just sort of existed beside of me, like I didn't let them steer the ship.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So you step on the plane in 2012, but before that, researching you, someone gave you a gift as a going away gift, a yellow envelope. What was that? Yeah.
So right before we left on the trip, some friends of ours, which was actually my old boss, my first boss that hired me to come out to Portland, her and her husband, they took us out to dinner, just kind of say goodbye. And at dinner, they gave us this going away present, and it was in a yellow envelope, and inside there was a check for $1,000 and instructions to give the money away as we traveled. And there were 3 rules. Don't overthink it. Share your experiences if you want to, and don't feel pressured to give it all away. So here we were about to leave for this trip, and now all of a sudden there was like this additional element of, wow, like we have now this money and this, in some ways, this purpose that we didn't have before of, kind of distributing it to people we met as we traveled.
That is an incredible gift. So you step on the plane, and where do you go first?
We bought a one-way ticket to Ecuador because it was the cheapest one-way ticket that we could find. There wasn't like any specific reason why we started there over anywhere else except for the cheap plane ticket. And so then we landed, in this whole new world, and really thus began like the hardest 6 months of my life.
All right. Why?
Because it's so easy to, kind of idealize what life on the road is going to be like. You think sunsets and, drinks and what you don't realize is, we weren't on vacation. Like, this was our life now, and it was completely different than the life we had left behind. I mean, in so many ways that it would take me a year to explain them all. But, some of the biggest were that all of a sudden it was just the 2 of us. We didn't have our support systems, our coworkers, our friends, our family, the people that were important pieces of our life before. And, this was kind of right when Skype was getting big and better, but it wasn't so easy to make, to video chat or make phone calls. And so, it was hard to stay connected in that way. We didn't have a home, we didn't know sometimes where we were going to sleep at night. And we made the mistake at first of just kind of moving too fast from one place to another. And it just, you feel kind of manic after a while, you miss the simple routines of, even though that was what I wanted to get away from, which was like the endless routine, in its place then was this sort of endless change. And that was just as hard. And then, on top of that, my marriage went through some really, really hard times because some of the things that we had just kind of buried, like when you're living kind of a normal 9-to-5 life and really in your routine, I think it's kind of easy to just not pay attention or to just kind of ignore some of the things that deep down are kind of knocking at you, right? Like that this isn't quite right, but it's easy to pretend like that's not there. All of a sudden, bam, you're together 24 hours a day. Bam, you have like all this time to think and really like dive deep inside of yourself, which is amazing. But, it brought up a lot of stuff that we hadn't confronted yet.
And you had to confront that on the road with the chaos of travel. How did that go?
Well, it was really ugly for a while. And really it was so intense that it got to the point where my husband and I actually separated on the road for a while. And it was just everything, I write about it in the book, okay. Hopefully more eloquently than I'm explaining it.
No, okay.
But the sort of magic of it all was that it forced us to make decisions about how we wanted to treat each other, who we wanted to be, and what we wanted our life to look like, and to be able to kind of give that time to ourselves personally. Because I had a lot of questions about who I was. I had started a career when I was young. I had married when I was young. I had always done like the right thing. I'd done the thing you're supposed to do. I had walked like that well-trodden path. And I hadn't spent a lot of time asking myself what parts of that life I wanted and what parts of that life I didn't want. And so evaluating my marriage was a part of that. So to be able to do that, and to be able to tell myself the only decision you have to make right now is the one that feels authentic and true to who you are, to allow myself that room, and then to kind of move through that, making the decision to be with my husband, making the decision to live a certain kind of life, and to come out the other side of that, it was like glorious because
Oh my gosh.
because then here I was, and the things were in place as they should have always been.
But it took this drastic of a decision in your life for you to get to the other side of that. What do you think would have happened if you would have stuck in your old life?
I don't know. I mean, I've thought about that so many times. I want to give myself credit and think, well, eventually you would have gotten to the same place. But I just don't know, because I think I ask more of my life now than I asked of it before, because I've seen sort of how it feels to kind of live when everything's in alignment. So I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a good chance that we probably maybe wouldn't be married right now, and who knows what else. I might still be working, in my environmental job and kind of wishing that I was doing something else. I don't know. And I'm glad I don't know. I'm glad that this was the path I took instead.
Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Click Placement, a digital agency designing Google AdWords and pay-per-click marketing strategies for startups, small businesses, and even people building a side hustle. Hit up clickplacement.com to start a conversation. If you would like to personally support the Go Hunt Life podcast, go to patreon.com/Go Hunt Life to make a donation.
You guys have traveled apart. You've traveled together. You came back to the United States as an ambassador to Backpacker magazine, and so we're 6 years down the road almost from this decision. How many countries have you visited in those 6 years?
Well, we visited about 25 countries and 47 of the lower 48 states when we were working for Backpacker magazine, and we haven't been doing much traveling lately, but hopefully it's in our future again someday.
You've been writing and trying to get your book published. I can't wait to get into that for sure. What about, is there one experience while traveling that you think of more than anything else?
A big one for me was, and this is in the book too, but I had agreed to do this thing called the rickshaw run. And it's in India, and you get like a 3-wheeled motorized rickshaw, and you drive it from the north of India to the south of India, about 2,000 miles. And so I had,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. I agreed to do this with these 2 women that I had never met before. And, I was terrified because I had never been to India before, but I read about the roads and just the sort of chaos, and I thought that I might die. People told me I might die. Even the website of this race says, you might die. So the fact, but for some reason I went anyway, and it was just the most intense and most beautiful experience, of my life in some ways, because before that point, I had been kind of like a type A sort of control freak. I always thought that if I didn't have a plan, if I wasn't sort of micromanaging every aspect of my life, that things would just kind of fall apart. And then when I got to India and everything had fallen apart, I mean, my marriage was like on the brink of failing. I was in this rickshaw that was like breaking down 13 times a day, and on these roads in these like crazy crowded cities and in the desert, where there was no one around, and just like nothing was in my control, nothing. And I just had to, I had a choice, and my choice was that I could either still try to control things, even knowing that I wouldn't be able to, and then sort of dealing with that feeling of, of not being able to make life go a certain way, right? Or I could just loosen this tight grip that I had on everything around me and just let it go, just see what happens. And that's what I learned to do in India, was to just trust that life would take care of me. And it did. And it still does to this day. And before that, I had never allowed life to kind of show up for me because I was kind of kicking it out of the way, thinking that I could do it all myself.
Wow. All right. So you finished the 2,000-mile journey in India. And as you said, your marriage was in shambles and, all that kind of stuff. How did you get back to you and Brian having being together again? And now you're a mom of a 2-year-old.
Yeah. So, after that, Brian and I kind of came back together and we rented this little apartment on the beach in India. And we just hashed it all out. We just said what we needed to say. We took the time that we needed to take for ourselves. And for me, so much of it for me was just learning. And it's like, duh, I feel like this is like counseling 101 or whatever. But what I really learned was that, I can't control anybody else, including my husband. I can't make him be somebody other than who he is. So I could love him for who he was. My decision was I could love him for who he was, or I could say, well, you know what? It's not what I want. And I'm going to leave. Like, those were my decisions.
Yeah.
And so, I made the decision to love him for who he is. But I think even more than that, I made the decision to love myself for who I was, to kind of forgive myself for all the ways I had failed myself over the years. It was just a bunch of, it's just the work I think most of us have to do to get to a place where we feel good, really good about our lives. It just so happened that I was doing it while we were traveling. So we kind of went through all of that. And then we kept traveling for a while. We eventually settled down in Mexico where we again rented a little apartment, and I started working on my book, and we decided, let's have a baby. So luckily, we were lucky and blessed enough that happened for us.
You've written 2 books. Let's go into that now. You've written Life on Fire, a step-by-step guide to living your dreams, and that published in September 2013. And then your most recent one, titled The Yellow Envelope, about your travels. What is different about The Yellow Envelope compared to your first book?
They're a lot different. My first book I wrote it on the road. And I wrote it is more of a guide than a book, and I wrote it because I felt that there had been so many things that I had kind of had to overcome to move into this new life that I wanted. And, realizing that not everyone's going to want to sell all their stuff and set out and travel the world. But it may be, I think most of us sort of harbor these things that we really, really, really deep down want to do, but we're afraid and we don't know how to get there. And so I thought, I'm just going to take sort of what I learned through my own experience and put it down on paper so that other people who have a big dream, no matter what it is, can read this little book and hopefully sort of have, in some ways, like an action plan, or when they're starting to feel things like fear, reading that, this is a normal part of the process. Doesn't mean I should stop. And so that was a book that I actually just self-published and sold on my blog. And then The Yellow Envelope was totally different because it's a memoir, and it's the story of kind of our years on the road traveling, and more importantly, of this gift, the yellow envelope, and who we met and who we gave the money to, and what I learned about kind of giving of money and giving of myself. And so that book, I went through the whole process of, finding an agent and finding a publisher and then having it traditionally published so it's in the bookstores and that sort of thing.
When you're giving away money on the road, how do you determine, was it difficult, and how do you determine this person is worthy and this other person isn't? That seems difficult.
It was difficult on so many levels. It was difficult, the first sort of part that was difficult was that we couldn't speak the language to, in most other countries, we only speak English and like terrible, terrible Spanish. And so, And so even just like not knowing how the gift would be received, because, in the US where I'm from, I understand kind of the cultural norms around giving and what to say and how to joke about it or whatever it might be in that instance to sort of do it in an acceptable way. And I didn't have that kind of knowledge in other countries. So that was it. And then the whole worthy thing, I mean, we didn't think about it like that, because that's like, who are you to determine who's worthy and who's not? And so, what we sort of ultimately ended up doing, because this felt natural, was that we kind of used the yellow envelope money as a way to say thank you to the many, many people throughout our journey that kind of came to our assistance, or just welcomed us into their homes, or in some way kind of, helped us kind of navigate through this new life that we were, stepping into. And then we also, donated to some organizations in places where, like in India, we really fell in love with these stray dogs that lived around our apartment. And there was an organization there that would take in all of the animals that were neglected and abused. And so, for instance, we gave money to that organization. So yeah, I mean, it was hard and it felt kind of icky, in some ways, because you don't want to be you don't want to be perceived as, here I am, this savior marching into this country and giving this money. We didn't feel like that, and we didn't want to be perceived in that way.
Yeah, I can definitely understand how you were trying to balance that for sure. So you've just published the book within the last year. What's been the coolest thing, feedback, or result from it since you've published it?
I mean, so many things. I've always dreamed of writing books. So the day it came out, to walk into the store, the local bookstore, and see my book on the shelf, I mean, it was a dream come true, truly a dream come true. And it was in Target for a little while. So like to walk into Target and see my book. I know, it was amazing. I was like, I would go like visit it, every day, and just like walk into Target and stare at it. But so, I mean, it's opened a lot of doors in the sense that I've been able to kind of travel all over the country and talk about the book and meet incredible people. And, kind of the most amazing thing is getting emails from people that have read the book and been touched by the book. That kind of makes the whole process worth it, because as a writer, you spend all this time alone kind of toiling over this thing and not knowing how it's going to be received. And for me, writing a memoir, really kind of spilling my guts on the page, it's a terrifying thing to do. And inevitably, there are going to be some people that just hate it and they hate you. And it's really hard to kind of deal with that kind of criticism. So to have that sort of other side of that coin where people love the book and it matters to them kind of makes the whole process worth it. I think that's why we write, is to find that connection between humans.
So you are now, as far as the book, like publishing process, you had said that you went to Mexico and you found a literary agent, and I mean, it's still a machine and it's an industry, and you put it, at some point you said you sold your book to Source Books. Is that, what does that mean?
So Source Books is the publisher,
okay.
Like, Penguin Random House or, whatever. I'm trying to think of some big ones you would know, but yeah. So what happens a lot of the time is, I wrote this book proposal, which was basically a business case for the book, saying, hey, I want to write this book called The Yellow Envelope. This is what it's going to be about. And then they take that proposal to some editors at these publishing houses. And if an editor likes it and wants to work with you, they will buy your book. So they basically give you an advance, some money so that you write the book. And then when the book comes out, then you earn royalties. So that's how most books that you see on the bookshelves at stores. That's kind of the process that most of them go through.
And this company got you into Target. I mean, that's a pretty good partnership between you and the company. And now you're on are you on a book tour? Are you running that? Is this company, like, how does that all work?
Yeah, for the most part, I did that. And, one of the great things I think about being a traveler, first of all, is you get really used to just becoming comfortable really quick anywhere. So I'm used to sleeping on couches and in strangers' guest bedrooms and that sort of thing. So, and I have this blog. So what I did was I put together a DIY book tour, all over the country and up into Canada even. And, I just crashed on people's couches and came to their towns and spoke at their bookstores and met a bunch of people, which is like the best thing about traveling is the people that you meet along the way. Yeah. But yeah, I organized all of that myself.
Wow. All right. So you are in Asheville now. What do you own? Have you bulked back up on possessions like before, or what is the situation?
Yeah. do you have any kids?
No.
Okay. It's impossible to have a kid without having like so much stuff. Even if we've barely bought any of it, but it still ends up in our house. So yeah, we just actually bought a house, in Asheville, and we do, we have a bed and a couch and all the kind of stuff that you own when you own a home. But, it's still a simple life. Like I feel really lucky in the sense my husband and I, we both work at home. So our family's together all the time. We can get outdoors as soon as work is done for the day. And it's, like I said, it's different. We're not traveling everywhere, but it's just like this really beautiful life that I know we wouldn't have had if we hadn't been through everything else that we've been through to kind of get to this point. Wow. And this isn't the end, but, we have a 2-year-old. We're putting roots down, in this place that we hope to be in for a long time.
What are you focused on in the next 6 months in regards to, well, you mentioned, you're a mom, travel, the book, like what's the next 6 months look like for you? What do you want to accomplish the most?
I've just been spending a lot of time kind of throwing myself into freelancing. I do a lot of writing about the outdoors and then also I do book proposal consulting, coaching. So I help people that have a book or, want to write a book and they need to write a book proposal. I kind of help them through that process as well. And then also, I hosted like my first little writing retreat in November of last year. And so I'm hoping to have a bigger writing retreat this year. So I'm just kind of building building this life around writing, which is the kind of life that I always wanted anyway. So it's exciting. And it's, my own business and it's just sort of me, doing what I love.
That sounds awesome. What is the most difficult part of writing and getting a book published that most people struggle with?
It's a ton of work. There's no guarantee that all of your hard work is going to pay off. You don't make a lot of money. So that's a problem. You kind of have to commit. Not that, some people make a ton of money, but most people, it's a hustle and it's like, it's following up all the time with ideas that you've pitched to people and chasing payment. And, I think kind of all of the problems that you have with, if you, run your own business, you kind of play every role. And writing's hard, it's hard to get your foot in the door. It's hard to kind of establish yourself and create a name for yourself. And you have to be really, really, really comfortable with rejection. You have to be the kind of person that doesn't stop just because you've been told no 100 times, because you will be told no 100 times. That's just a part of it.
Yeah, that's a small business owner. That's an athlete. That's everyone that's wanting to do something like that. That sounds awesome. I've got one more question for you. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. On December 5th, 2010 at 7:33 p.m., you sent out your first tweet at Kim Dinan. Do you remember what it was?
No, I have no idea.
All right, December 5th, 2010, 7:33 p.m. New to this world, planning, packing, and preparing for a RTW, round the world trip at so many places. And you had hashtags going with your first tweet, RTW now and hashtag travel. Do you remember where you were when you sent that out?
I was probably on my couch in Portland after work. In fact, I'm 100% sure that's where I was.
There you go. All right. You can find Kim at so many places with hyphens in between so many places. And the yellow envelope is on Amazon and on Facebook, So Many Places Travel Blog, and on Twitter at Kim Dinan. Kim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Don't forget to hit up the online printing rock stars at printdirtcheap.com and use promo code LifeHunter for $10 off. Hey, Life Hunters, thank you for listening to this episode of Go Hunt Life. If you like the show and would like to support it, go to iTunes and do this. Subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and review it. It helps. And thank you. If you or someone that you know has quit their normal life to follow their dreams, I would love an introduction and maybe interview them on the show. You can find me at gohuntlife.com and also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at Go Hunt Life. Until next time, stay weird, dare greatly, and ripcord out.